Angela Futch, and I'm going to be reading a piece from my new book. It's called Genuinely Genuine. You can get it on Amazon. And this piece speaks on how I feel about myself and my place in this world and my purpose in this world, and how I am able to express that I believe that everyone has a purpose here, no matter what you believe in. And so I feel like this piece really just summarizes all the feelings that I feel when I think about things like this. And so this piece is called To Be Unstoppable. You are not what you see. You are the sun rising in the day and the stars shining at night. You are not the world around you. You are the moon's gravitational pull, shifting waves and forming tides. You are not the posts you read or the likes you depend on. You are a creator of realities. Free yourself from the barriers of society. You are bound to nothing as long as you see through the facade. Let go of fear and let your imagination run wild. Search for your truth, and when you find it, share it with the world, and you will find that you are unstoppable.
That is amazing. Angela, thank you for providing that message. In this time, in this context where we're at, that's the message we need to hear. And I validate your truth. I validate your emotions. And I'm glad that you were able to use this platform to speak and empower to others. And because you did this, you've set the stage and the platform for why we are here today. My name is Winston Ashby. I'm the executive director and founder of the Positive Alternative Recreation Team Building Impacting Program. And I am here with some giants. And the giants that I am here with are going to speak up about COVID-19, and they're going to speak up about schools from their own lips, from their own hearts, from their own emotions. I remember it was in March, and schools have said, hey, we're going to shut down for a couple of weeks. And then we're going to come right back after school break. And now we are in August. Some kids did not graduate on a stage. Some kids did not promote with their family being able to recognize and celebrate them. And we are asking them to accept a new normal. So here to talk with me about what that new normal looks like from their own perspective is Vaibhava. Vaibhava, please tell us your name, your age, school, and why you're here today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vaibhava Rajesh, and I'd just like to thank Winston for introducing me, and I'd like to thank everyone that's here watching this program. It means a lot to me. And I am a freshman at Evergreen Valley High School in San Jose, and I'm happy to be with you all today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this event. Something I do in my community is engage and participate in speech and debate and leadership opportunities that promote youth voices, which is something that we'll be doing today. I believe it is very important for adults and youth to come together and create an engaging conversation that helps us inform ourselves about the experiences of others and current events. I'm so glad that I have a voice today to speak up about important issues and topics and things that we'll be covering.
Wow, thank you very much. And you're in the 8th grade?
I'm actually in the 9th grade this year.
You're an incoming freshman, and you're now in high school. School has started for you, correct?
Yes, it just started yesterday.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. And to my other side is Victoria. Victoria, tell us about yourself. Give us your age, grade, school, and why you're here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Victoria Twee V. McDowell. I am 16 years old, and I am a current senior at Los Gatos High School. Fortunately, I have had the opportunity to be very involved in the community by volunteering and performing as a singer for various nonprofits and events to help raise money for the homeless, the elderly, orphans, and the underserved all around the world. I'm so happy and excited to be a part of this program to raise awareness and address issues going on in our community today. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the program.
Yes, we will. So what's next, Vibe?
All right, and next we have introductions to our wonderful panelists that have joined us today. I would like to welcome Dr. Dewan for joining us today as one of our panelists. Dr. Dewan is the Santa Clara County Superintendent of Schools and has over 27 years of experience in education. Dr. Dewan advocates for many important issues and has led many important initiatives such as the early learning advocacy work. We are so thankful to have her tonight and appreciate the time that she has donated to us in order to have these important discussions.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so happy to have you here tonight.
Yeah, so before we get started, there were some things that we needed to do, but we have one more person that we also need to introduce that's going to be able to provide us some context.
All right. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Jeff, who is our second panelist this evening. Dr. Jeff is an associate professor of Raza Studies, Education Administration, and Interdisciplinary Studies at San Francisco State University. Prior to this, Dr. Jeff has worked as a coach and taught in Oakland for almost a decade. Dr. Jeff continues to be very involved in schools and closely works with schools all over the community. We are so thankful to have you, Dr. Jeff, in our program today and look forward to talk to you about all of the different topics that we'd like to cover.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor.
Yeah, so we have some strong allies from the Santa Clara County Office of Education, San Francisco State University, and through their work and their experience and their history, they've had a strong background and resume in supporting youth voice. So as we get into that, I wanted to share a video about the reflection of a young person about what took place after he was supposed to graduate from high school. Senior in high school, his name is Moon, and George Floyd was murdered. He has to finish school. Him and his peers now have another thing that they have to think about, have to process. But instead of being able to be around a safety net at their school or with their peers, they have to process this on their own, alone. So let's listen to the video.
Hello, my name is Moon Ashby, and I'm here to talk about stopping the violence. How I feel about the recent events that are happening right now and today in America with George Floyd and other African Americans is a pent-up anger, injustice, and sadness, and that's how I'm feeling. This is injustice because the way I'm talking about me as an African American in our community, how we get perceived by other people. Anger because it's been happening too long. It's been happening for over 300 years, and it has not stopped. Sadness because innocent people who have loved ones, they're gone, and there's nothing we can really do about that. We can't bring them back either, and that just brings sadness to my heart. Party has helped through giving me and my community a voice on how we can speak up and how we feel and how we should change things too, giving us tools to change things. And I think that's really important, and that's powerful to the young community. I commit to spreading awareness.
All right. And we thank this message because what I've been able to see through the work that we do in the party program is young people wanting to utilize their gifts, their voice. And in a time where there's personal anxiety, maybe some people are going through some depression, we need to be able to create a platform for safe communication, safe dialogue, but something that will be able to allow us to leave that conversation with some action. So I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let Victoria begin by asking the first question.
So my first question is for Dr. Dewan. Dr. Dewan, in an interview for Bay Area Women magazine, you said that, as a teacher, I thought it was important to create the conditions in the classroom for active learning and collaboration. Students demonstrate their knowledge and are most engaged with hands-on learning, lessons, and projects. In a group call that I attended with 3 other high school students at neighboring schools, one student made a comment saying that they are experiencing a lack of drive to attend these online classes since we won't have the full interactive experience that we get in our classrooms. How do you feel about the remote learning that students are currently adapting to, and how do you think that will affect the students' learning based on the interactive way of learning that you say is best for students?
I just want to thank you all again for inviting me tonight and just share how humbled I am to be here speaking during this time and in this context. Yes, I do really highly value hands-on learning and collaboration, and especially when young people can co-create the curriculum, the lessons, the activities that they may be doing to demonstrate their understanding of the standards. So I think, the situation with distance learning is something that's put upon us, and it really challenges us to be more creative and to think about how these tech tools can both facilitate learning, but also how they can have their proper place during the school day and in our learning. So while distance learning is going to be involving online lessons and Zoom and maybe WebEx and other platforms, times throughout the day should be dedicated to other types of activities. And that could be things such as expression through the arts. It could be the design of projects. Maybe rather than the teacher delivering a lot of the lesson and content, finding ways that students can present in these new platforms and in these activities. I also think that there's a lot of opportunity to balance out the screen time with other kinds of learning. So that could be hands-on learning kits, science activities and experiments. And schools can provide those types of resources to students, and also students can often find some ways to be creative and discover things in their own environment. And I think another way that we need to ensure that we're balancing this time with the screen and time away from the classroom is with outdoor activities and reconnecting to our neighborhood, to our backyards or community places where young people can exercise and really step away from the computer and step away from the screen.
Yeah.
And I think all of those things together can help balance out the impacts of distance learning, still allowing that positive connection that can occur, but not letting it overwhelm the delivery of instruction in a way that becomes negative and harmful.
Yes, I completely agree. To follow up that question, I wanted to ask, how do you think schools can confirm that students have support at home to do these assignments and do the homework?
No, I was thinking about that today, and while I'm not a student anymore and I'm not in school, I was thinking back to when I was a student, and if I were in the situation that families are facing today, how challenging it would be for our family, with brothers and sisters at home and, all kinds of other things that we have to share on a regular basis to try to share during a time when we're trying to learn as well. Can be very challenging. And so I think some of the ways to do that, schools can make connections with families via email, cell phone, teleconference, having some hotlines and ways that families can alert the school or school principal or teacher. I think it's really important for the teacher to have a connection to the family so that there's a lot of awareness about the context that we're all experiencing together. And I also really think youth voice is important, and for children to know who the trusted adults are in their school and school campus. Even though we're not there physically, we are still there. And so really taking advantage of those connections with trusted personnel on school campus, whether that's the teacher, a paraprofessional, the school principal, a counselor, or someone else.
Thank you so much. My next question is to Dr. Jeff Duncan. So, Dr. Jeff, in an interview for the New York Times, you said, "We are so deeply embedded in the factors that impinge on a school without an analysis of the particular context. What is the political economy? What is the neighborhood structure?" I read in the interview that you work in Oakland, where the Black Panthers started. You also stated that there is something about being a youth in Oakland that makes you different from those who demographically mirror you. As an African American at a primarily Caucasian school, I have definitely been told by my African American friends that I know from Oakland and other surrounding cities that I have been quote unquote whitewashed and act a certain way because of the neighborhood that I grew up in. How do you think students can feel more comfortable in the environment that they are placed in?
It's a great question, and I think that it's a timely question for the condition that that this nation is in right now. What that young person is reflecting back is the blowback of white supremacy, and what it means to be a Black person, an Indigenous person, a person of color in this society, and constantly having your identity challenged, your identity devalued, questioned, and to be in a sort of perpetual state of having to, just as the young brother said in his video, of sort of managing all these emotions from rage to sadness to disconnectedness. This is endemic of the kind of ether that not that we're just sucking in right now. I think people have sort of lasered in on this in some ways right now, but for people of color in this nation, like we've been in pandemic. We've been experiencing the impacts of radicalized inequality, and suddenly, like the rest of the nation is experiencing what we've been talking about for, as the brother said, for 300 plus years. So the question for me is whether or not, is this the wake up call? And is this the time when this nation finally decides to repurpose public schools and to ask itself some real questions about what are we doing here? I mean, what are we doing when we take children away from their families for 8 hours a day for 13 consecutive years? And you've got young brothers and sisters that are in high school wondering about whether or not their identity is okay. That to me, that's an indictment of a whole lot of things, but in particular, it's an indictment of the pedagogy and curriculum that we've been using in our schools under the auspices that we care about young people and we're promoting this, this future for them. And frankly, none of the data bears that out, particularly for people of color. And so, I feel like if not in this moment, when we are in a double global health pandemic, if this is not the moment when schools recenter themselves and understand that the primary purpose of schools in this nation should be youth wellness, and that the pathway to youth wellness means that schools are going to have to pull back from relationships with Pearson and Hope Mifflin and business as usual, questioning everything down to what we call standards, and reimagining that at the center of the project needs to be the wellness of children. And we measure what matters. Data is the coin of the realm in schools. And so when schools tell me that they care about the wellness of young people, the first thing I ask them is, well, how do you measure that? And if your first measurement of that is test scores, GPA, college going, college to career pathways, those sorts of things, then I'm questioning your moral compass. Because it's not that those things aren't important. I mean, what a hypocrite I would be sitting here with my PhD saying that those things didn't matter. Of course they matter. But what we know in the research and what we know in the time-honored practice, and what we know from the teachings of our ancestors, is that those things that I just named off are lagging indicators. And so the real question that we should be focusing on right now is, what are the leading indicators of student engagement, student achievement, and student wellness? And those are the things that we can measure around well-being. And if those become the driving metrics of schools, then a lot of the things that we've been chasing, the lag indicators around engagement, around attendance, around math, reading, writing, those things are going to come along. And the truth of the matter is that the only place that we're debating this right now is inside of the field of education and amongst ideologues. In the research community, whether you're talking about the medical field, psychology, social epidemiology, public health, neuroscience, there's no debate about that. And the question is can schools capitalize on this moment to really make a hard pivot to focus on wellness and to focus on things like ethnic studies? If this brother had had ethnic studies from the time that he was, or she was in kindergarten, that question would have been very different. And their ability to respond to that question from their white classmates would have been very different.
Wow. I gotta take 2 seconds here. We had two very powerful remarks about engaging kids in the learning process, engaging kids in the action planning, engaging young people with their cultural perspective, their ethnicity, their identity. So those of you who are listening on the call or on the Zoom, feel free to text your questions right now. Begin doing that right now, because we're having a party of education. We're having a party of inclusion. So you don't want to miss this party. So go ahead and start texting your questions that you have so that we can answer them or we could ask them right here. Go ahead and continue. Thank you.
I wanted to ask Dr. Jeff, could you elaborate on your statement about how being a youth in a specific area makes you different from those who demographically mirror you?
Sure. So what I'm talking about there is the reality that culture in the context, particularly of schools, as schools have sort of scrambled to repair their relationships with communities of color and poor and working class communities, they've taken on this idea that they want to be culturally responsive. And the problem is that schools did not spend a lot of time actually trying to understand what culture is and what it means. And had that happened, then there would have been clarity about the fact that culture is not a proxy for race. I mean, race is a component of culture, but so is gender, so is sexual identity, so is language, so is age. Like the culture that you two have right now as high school students is different than the culture that my 7-year-old sons have. And yet, like you're both considered youth, right? So there's a whole host of things that go into making up culture. And to be culturally responsive means that a school has to be responding to all of those elements. They can't essentialize it and say, oh, well, you're a black kid. And I taught in East Oakland for, 25 years, and I was really good with black kids there. And now I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and you're a black kid. And so I'm just going to port over the stuff that I did in East Oakland. It doesn't work that way. Like your zip code is also part of your culture. And so the term that our organization has really been trying to support schools to utilize is the concept of community responsiveness. Mm-hmm. Because to be community responsive, you have to be culturally responsive. But when you begin thinking about pedagogy and curriculum and assessment and relationships, you have to start where you stand. Okay. And understanding that particular community and the unique and particular history of the community that has led us to this particular place. And when you have that kind of historical trajectory informing, then, so what the Black Panthers, to sort of bring up what you were saying earlier, what the Black Panthers might mean for a young person in Oakland is going to be different than what the Black Panthers might mean for a young person in, say, Iowa. Are the Black Panthers important to be studied in both of those places? Absolutely. But it has to be in relationship to the context. That has to be the starting point that begins to then open up the window for young people to begin to explore other contexts. So this goes all the way back to Dewey at the turn of the 20th century when he talked about the child and the curriculum. This is not a particularly new idea. We've just largely ignored it in an effort to build out what we've essentially tried to call rigor, but it's a false rigor, right? True rigor begins with the young person and the material conditions and the history that has shaped those, and then begins to think about what does it mean to have a meaningful curriculum and pedagogy in that context.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that was really powerful. And I also wanted to say I really connect with that because we learned in class when we were looking at our textbooks, they also included an excerpt from a Texas textbook. And we saw the complete difference where they would take out certain sentences just because those students wouldn't want to hear about that or they would be too sensitive to those certain things. And I thought that was just so interesting when they told us over here in California that the kids in Texas just weren't learning the same things. So that was really powerful. Thank you. Thank you to the both of you for answering my questions.
Great question. Vaibhava.
All right, so these next two questions are open for either of the panelists, and back and forth can go ahead and start. So the third question that we have this evening is, Dr. Jeff, in an interview with New York Times, Dr. Jeff stated that if we actually want a public education system that creates an engaged citizenry, we have to, basically Dr. Jeff states that in order to kind of have a wonderful classroom environment, we need to make sure that students are being engaged in citizenry and being patriotic in civics and all of those things where we are being educated on all of these different topics and ethnics and all of these different things. So how would we bring those citizenry and how would we bring those aspects to schools so that we can establish democracy in schools and make sure that we are learning the core values of our country and practicing those kind of things? How would you think would be the best way to incorporate those in our schools? And of course, Dr. Jeff can start by answering, and Dr. Dewan can go ahead and kind of propose an idea or propose ways that this is already being included in the Santa Clara County.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, I'll return to some of my earlier statements about, I think ethnic studies is a great starting place for us to really begin to engage young people critically in the historical inequities and the racialized inequities that are plaguing and literally tearing at the basic fabric of our society right now. We've got to support young people, and particularly this next generation of young people to be much more conversant in that history, and to really envision what it would actually mean to move from the rhetoric of a pluralistic multiracial democracy to the reality of a pluralistic multiracial democracy. But I don't see that happening as simply a sort of like a curricular intervention or a programmatic intervention. I'll repeat what I said earlier, that we've got to center wellness as the primary project of public schools in this country. And so as a way to kind of illuminate this a little bit for our conversation, I'm going to share a few slides that I think could be some good resources, both for this conversation and for folks that are watching to think about how to take this, kind of like 30,000 foot concept of wellness, like who's against wellness, like who's going to vote against, like, but that's dangerous, right? Like our communities have got to be self-determining, particularly communities of color and communities in poverty. the most vulnerable and the most wounded communities have got to have the access, power, and privilege to be able to define what wellness actually means. Otherwise, they'll have wellness done to them. And that's not wellness, right? That's an age-old, right, project that has created the lack of wellness. So let me share my screen here. This is a definition that our organization, Community Responsive Education, developed in partnership for over years with a whole host of folks. Okay, so I don't want anybody to think that this is our definition. This happened through collaborations with some of the leading thinkers and researchers, some incredible indigenous healers, young people, families, all came together to really help us think about what would it mean for us to be self-determining in the ways in which we talk about wellness. And so what that collective came up with is a definition that reads, wellness is the harmonizing of mind, body, emotion, and spirit. It is cultivated and sustained through healthy relationships that are responsive to the lived experiences and the historical and material conditions that shape them. Community responsive wellness strengthens the sacred link between self-actualization and community actualization in 3 domains. And so the places where we really work with schools and educators to press around wellness is in these 3 domains. The inner self, young people have to love themselves for who they are. They have to know their value. They have to value the ancestors that they came from. They have to value the beauty of their own block. And when that happens, right, then they're much better prepared to engage in interpersonal wellness, which is the kinds of relationships that they shape up with their peers, with their family, with their teachers, and with the broader society. And what is often left out of that conversation is the third one, which is interconnectedness, which is really about connecting to the larger ecosystem, the earth, right? Trees, animals, all of the systems that allow us to breathe and thrive. Okay, so inner self is a strong sense of culture, identity, and agency, right? And there is tons of evidence to suggest that ethnic studies is the best thing going out there, particularly for the most vulnerable and the most wounded children, to build this sense of inner self. I would argue that what the research also suggests is that when white children are exposed to ethnic studies, they also develop a deeper sense of self-love. The second, interpersonal, is a rootedness and commitment to showing empathy toward family, community, and peers. And the key word there for us is empathy, which is about transitioning from sympathy. Sympathy and empathy are not the same things. Empathy literally creates a biochemical reaction in your body and your brain because you're connecting to folks. And empathy is about your suffering is my suffering. If we want an engaged, critical, civic-minded population, we have got to develop empathy in our young people. And in order for that to happen, young people have to love themselves, and they have to be able to connect to others through that love of themselves. And the third piece is interconnectedness, which is a positive interrelatedness to ancestors, place, land, and the natural world. This grows ecosystems where people and communities experience place, power, purpose, awareness, resilience, empathy, hope, love, and joy. That list at the end, that is the work that we're doing with schools to figure out how do you actually measure those things, because everything in the research clearly suggests that when young people are moving the meter on those things at the bottom, that the other things that schools are currently tracking tend to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
I think that's very powerful, and I think something that's just been a prevalent problem in our society is the lack of empathy that we have, and I think that ethnic studies is definitely something that being implemented would benefit everyone and benefit all students. Now, as my experience as an Indian American, I definitely have experienced similar experiences as to Victoria has experienced, where it feels like I don't belong in a certain category, or we are feeling like we are being categorized just based on a race. And ethnic studies, like I said before, is something that my district is trying to implement. And so we were actually doing a project last year when I was in 8th grade, where we were able to pick any topic we found was interesting to us and present it and talk about why this was interesting and why this is a prevalent issue. And some of the students that were doing that project actually chose to present about why they felt ethnic studies was unnecessary in our daily lives, and that it shouldn't be something that we should include. And I find that very interesting, and it's kind of showing why this is basically the root problem about how students really don't understand that, and bringing ethnic studies would help that understanding. And no matter where we're going to travel, we need to understand people around us, and ethnic studies will definitely help make that happen. And so as a superintendent, observing and working closely with many different schools, could Dr. Dewan respond to how we can implement ethnic studies in the systems to allow us to incorporate these principles of democracy and main principles that are very important to our country?
We certainly see and value the role of ethnic studies, and our office has made a lot of investments in the work of ethnic studies, supporting projects and training, and supporting teachers and having the capacity and skills to integrate ethnic studies through the K-12 school system. So one of my thoughts around it is how important ethnic studies can be in fostering curiosity and developing perspective and creating a way for dialogue to occur. I also really value the importance of shifting our perspective in the way that we think about history, or the way that we traditionally have taught history or learned it. And maybe thinking about it less about historical figures and people, and maybe even events, and focusing more on perspective and critical thinking, and developing the skills with each other to have civil discourse and to know how to challenge perspectives and beliefs, and really anchor ourselves more in the values and principles that we share that could be a part of our democracy. I also really think civic engagement is something that begins when we're young. It begins when we're children. It begins when we are in community with family or in our neighborhood. And civic engagement can look like things when we're older, such as voting. It can look like public service and elected office. But it can also look like participating in problem solving in our community and raising awareness about challenges that we're facing, and helping to develop teams and collaboration around addressing those challenges and problems. I think the role of a county office in this work is, one, conceptual, how we raise up the ideas and the concepts and create the space for those in the education field, parents, elected officials, and others to learn about it. I think the other thing that's important for county offices to do in support of our districts and schools is training for teachers. But I think thirdly, it's really important that we're creating these avenues for youth and for youth voice. And many of the ways that our office has done that is to create events where we're exposing young people to these opportunities to engage civically, serving on panels, similar to what you're all doing here today. Also for young people to learn different ways of writing, different ways of pitching their ideas and their concerns, and those types of ways of fostering creativity and curiosity, but empowerment with tools is the way in which we can, I think, transform our communities, including our school communities. I would just also add that ethnic studies is both a curriculum, and a course. It can be, but it can also be something that is integrated and a part of the way that we learn our lessons throughout schooling. And it doesn't have to be relegated to a particular grade level or particular credit earning course. It is something that can be woven into the fabric of our K-12 system.
I think that's a wonderful point, and I'm currently taking ethnic studies as my elective course, so I can't wait to open my curiosity and just better myself as a person, understanding all these different perspectives. And I really like how we are doing a lot right now to include these important aspects in our schooling systems, and I think that will come with a lot of benefits. Now, following that question, I think with all of the stuff going on in COVID-19 and all of the uncertainty that's happening, not only just for the way things are going to run, but the way students are feeling and those long-term goals that students have been working towards. What are the resources that students can look towards to help determine goals and aspirations for the future? So seniors that are going into college or applying for colleges. And because of the way COVID-19 came in, our goals have been affected, so how can students deal with this uncertainty during COVID-19? And Dr. Jeff and Dr. Dewan can go ahead and go back and forth and answer this question.
Well, I'd be happy to start on that, since we recognize that all the traditional ways that we thought about progressing from high school into college and career were upended when the tests got canceled and we weren't sure how to do grading, and some of the other types of mentoring and internships and things that would have happened in person didn't happen in the way that we expected. I think it's, that assessment around our goals and our values and what we're looking to do is something that young people are doing and adults are doing as well. And I think as far as setting goals, it is important to set goals, thinking about the short term and as well as the long term, and not being so hard on ourselves that we have to know the exact next step or the exact next answer, because there is still going to be a lot of uncertainty as our community, our country wrestles with COVID-19. That being said, I've really recognized that our colleges and universities are also challenged and reimagining the ways in which they engage with high school students and that recruitment towards college. And I also think that there are new ways of thinking about our routines and the aspirations that we may set. I share in what Dr. Jeff was talking about early with the focus on wellness. And I also think that focus in our goals individually and collectively around wellness is important and can help us with whatever may happen post-COVID-19. But I also think that taking a recognition of what can be done during this time. So maybe it doesn't look the exact same way that we thought it could, but there are many ways in which we can contribute to solution seeking. We can still have internships. We can still, serve our community, for example, and we can still really dig deep into our studies and our self-growth. So I think that colleges and universities are already talking about that, how they're going to look at the whole child, the whole person, this whole young adult experience that is happening during COVID, and not putting so much emphasis and weight on abstract things such as an SAT score or an ACT score. So, it's not that those things aren't potentially valuable in some settings, but we recognize from a values place that there are many other things that make up who we are and make up our ability to be successful.
That's a wonderful point that you bring up, and I do agree with a lot of the different aspects that you have brought up. And would Dr. Jeff like to answer the same question, possibly providing resources and ways that we can kind of deal with this uncertainty during this time?
Well, first of all, I agree with a lot of what was just said. But I think that what I would add is that I wouldn't presume to know. That I would actually start by asking young people in my community, right? Like, I mean, what a great way to start your class, right? Is like, and I don't care whether you're talking about kindergarten or senior high school, right? I feel like a little bit of this discussion has really, and I think is the nature of like y'all are in high school, but I have twin 7-year-old boys. Right. So, a lot of my wonderings about like, what does this look like for a second grader, but in with respect to this question, I think the starting point really should be the same, which is, start by asking the young people in your class, like, what are your aspirations? What do you want to accomplish this year? Right. Can we have a more dynamic way to develop a curriculum and a syllabus that's really driven by the young people's interest? I mean, now is the time when we can really innovate in schools, because what else are we going to do? Like, we cannot do business as usual right now. So I think really that's why I was so honored to come into this space and be like, yes, let the young people start asking us questions. Let the young people start framing the debate that we need to have. And so, I think that you start there, right? And you really explore what is it that young people feel like they want to accomplish. And then you just become, in some ways as a teacher, like the best teachers that I'm around, they're glorified gophers. Like they're just running around getting resources for young people to pursue and chase down their wildest dreams. And they're putting some structure to it and some support to it. But I think that now is a great opportunity to do that. The advice I would give to young people is one thing that I think you can do, is that you can start thinking about which of your classmates need you. And, I have to watch all these like crazy commercials because my 7-year-olds insist that they get, 40 minutes of screen time every night. And so I'm watching, Mira the Royal Detective and Hero Elementary. And if y'all don't know about that, you got to get gamed up on those. Are some like amazing shows, but they have these commercials that run the same commercial over and over and over again. And one of them that I really like is this commercial where it's basically about like, there's these two, adolescents that are sitting on a couch together. And one of them is trying to figure out how to ask their homie how they're doing. And it's super awkward, right? And the sort of like the message of the commercial is just ask. It doesn't matter how you ask, right? Just show up, just be there. And so I think that that's one of the best things that young people can do and can aspire to do around empathy. Like, think about which of your classmates need a check-in. Y'all know, who your homies are and the young people in your school that are the most vulnerable. And you're mobile, you're super dexterous, using your devices and also, like on foot going wherever you're going. I would love to see young people activate around taking care of each other as a part of our pedagogy and curriculum. And in the best classrooms that I've been in pre-COVID, that already happened. That was normed. It really felt like a community. And folks were knowing if somebody was coming in hurting, then the class would rally around that young person and support them. And the result of that was that the learning got deeper because it was bigger than right. It was bigger than the curriculum. It was bigger than the test score. It was bigger than the essay. It was about us. And in the dopest classrooms that I've been in, the climate and the culture is it's all of us or none of us. Nobody in here is failing. Nobody in here is getting left behind. Everybody's going to be well. And unfortunately, that's not the norm. But this is a moment where it could become more normal. And certainly it's a mantle that young people could take up with each other.
Wow.
I would just add to that too, that, this is a big, huge experiment and change, like just a significant amount of change and the kinds of things that we thought we could count on that, just don't exist in the same way that they did before. And we don't know when they may come back. And so a lot of the maybe sadness or social isolation and fear that we're experiencing is directly related to that change. And a lot of it is to be expected. And so some of the resource is the resource that we have within each other, within ourselves, to engage in self-care and to practice mindfulness and to journal and to reach out to others to break that sense of isolation. And so I really think that there's this opportunity to create space to acknowledge how COVID-19 is impacting us. And then also to create that path for managing it, learning to live with these changes, and learning how to express ourselves in a way that promotes the wellness that we want for each other.
I wanted to chime in something, and this is just to recap what I'm hearing you say. And I implore you, if you're at home looking at this, ask some questions. A few of you have already asked questions, which we'll begin to share that. So it's a community discussion. But there was something that you said, Dr. Dewan, when you mentioned internships, summer activities, colleges visiting high school students, or school or kids visiting colleges. Being able to have that mindset of changing the game. It doesn't, okay, this is the way we used to do it. Now it has to change. And Dr. Jeff, you had mentioned allowing young people to check in on each other, right? Allowing young people to say, okay, how are we doing today? Being able to have that as part of the curriculum and the standards of class. That's the message I got from both of you. Dr. Dewan, can I ask you how can we help schools to have and shift to this type of mindset in Santa Clara County?
I think that we can help schools by expressing to them what we need, and also taking advantage of the things and the opportunities that are presented. A lot of our schools did offer some summer experiences, whether that was athletic conditioning. Some of them had in-person camps, summer camps. I know our office, for example, we operated our Walden West outdoor experience camps. And so, I think that there is more opportunity and more things available through our schools than perhaps we're all truly aware of. I also think that it isn't just schools. It really is community centers, cities, our clinics. We have a lot of partners in community that we can reach out to break that sense of social isolation. I also know that a lot of our programs did transform themselves into virtual experiences. And so young people did have some opportunities for internships that were online or in some other way offered virtual shadowing or virtual experiences. And then I think too, we mentioned earlier about the arts, really keeping a focus on expression and taking advantage of these opportunities that might present themselves for singing and for expression through painting and writing and poetry, vocal expressions, debate. All of those types of opportunities, I think, are really key during this time as well.
Okay.
Awesome. I want to just double down on that real quick.
Sure.
One thing that you said in particular that I think we haven't really touched on is so important, which is this can't all land on schools. This can't all land on teachers. I mean, we already are a nation that radically underfunds, right, its public education system, and and the total negligence on the part of the federal government to get support to the most needy families right now, like where do you think all that's going to fall? Where do you think the lack of a support bill getting signed off on is going to fall now that we're back in school? It's going to fall on teachers. It's going to fall on school leaders. And what you said is so important, that for too long, we've looked to schools to fix every social ill that we've created and that we keep investing in, right? Maintaining. Mm. And so I think schools have a really significant role to play, but the government, business, right? Community needs to step up and really support schools right now, because all of it is falling on us. And frankly, we're dealing with the pandemic just like everybody else. So now we're dealing with our pandemic, and we're asked to hold all the suffering of all these young people that are also, right, dealing with this radicalized inequality in the shape of a double pandemic. We have to do better. And it is totally unfair to keep asking schools to do more with less.
Okay, so I would love to have a wonderful conversation with you about that. But what I'm going to do is, Dr. Jeff, is I am going to take heed to what you said about asking the kids. And so I'm going to ask Vaibhava first. Vaibhava, how are you coping during COVID-19?
I want to say that COVID-19 has changed some of the biggest factors that I have basically looked to my life as normal and all of the things I can rely on. And it has changed the way I feel towards school, the way I feel towards opening a laptop and getting on a Zoom meeting and considering that my first day of high school. And it's definitely something that I feel like I've just kind of had to bottle up and deal with and cope with. And just seeing all of these different problems, brought to my attention, and all of these very important social and educational issues that we are using this wonderful time to educate ourselves about, I think it's something that's super overwhelming for me as a 14-year-old, and I definitely say teenagers my age feel the same way.
So I heard the word overwhelmed and getting ready to prepare for something new. Is that okay? And then, so I'm going to ask Victoria the same question.
I feel very similar to how Vaibhava feels. I think it would only be a little different just because I'm getting ready to go on to college, and a lot of our resources were taken away due to COVID-19, such as taking our SAT, ACT. So I think that adds a lot more stress onto our backs, and I feel like we don't really have a place to talk about it. We don't have a place to just explain how we feel, and we aren't given time to process what we're feeling. And so I think we all as seniors need more help with understanding what's truly going on so that we can be prepared for college, because especially since our senior year is what we look forward to, even going back all the way to elementary school, I think it's really tough to watch it go by. Even though it just started today for me, I know that it's going to go by really quickly, and it's not going to be the same as I was expecting it to be. So that's kind of disappointing for me personally. Okay,
so you mentioned that, hey, you need some more help preparing to navigate through this, right? And it's already the first day of school, or and now you have to process all these things, all the help that you need, and who is going to help you. So thank you, both of you, for sharing that. And then I am going to take a question from Grayson. Grayson, we hear you out there. We hear you. And I'm going to ask the question, which was directed to the students, for you to answer those questions. And then Dr. Dewan and Dr. Jeff, if you want to chime in afterwards, we definitely appreciate it, and we want to hear from you as well. Okay, so the question is from Grayson. We hear you out there. How do you feel COVID-19 was handled in the United States?
So I'd like to go ahead and start, if that's okay with Victoria.
For sure.
Sure.
And I'd like to say that the way it was handled, first of all, I want to start with social distancing, because that was the first way we were preparing into it.
All right, talk about you. How do you feel?
All right, for
Yes.
me, I definitely want to say it was so sudden, but at the same time, I feel like the way it was handled and the way it was explained and the way we were educated about it was so unorganized. And frankly, I still don't know when am I going back to school. And it's so uncertain, the amount of uncertainty that COVID-19 has brought us, and the way it was handled, how social distancing started, how we were all basically told, oh, we'd come back to school after 2 weeks. And it's August. We're going into our senior years. We're going into our freshman years. And we still don't know, when is this going to end? When are we going to, follow social distancing? And when are our government officials going to step up to how other countries are handling it and see them as examples of ways that we need to take care of the situation better, educationally, emotionally, socially, and in all aspects? So that's the way I feel it was handled, and we definitely need to step up and handle this better.
Thank you, Vaibhava. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. I think that the U.S. government definitely did not handle it well enough, and I wish that they could just give us more information, not only for youth, but just everybody in general. And I think, as Vaibhava said, it's very unorganized, and they continue to reopen and then close back because cases go back up. And I think if you want to eliminate this so that we can finally actually go back to normal, I think you need to be stricter with what we're doing so that we can definitely have it last as long as it's going to. And right now, we honestly all have no clue how long this is going to last, what's going to happen in the future. And I think that's just really scary for us, especially as youth, because we have to attend school and we have so many other things to worry about right now. And so I just wish we could have more information and it could be more organized.
All right, and I'm going to get to you two in just a second. I'm going to pitch this question to you again. How was COVID-19 handled? I want you to talk from the mindset of you being a junior in high school. So your school, your teachers, your entire environment at school. The answer that you're going to give is going to also help this young person who is now a freshman in high school, right?
Right.
So go ahead.
So I think that for the end of my junior year, it was definitely very sudden. Mm-hmm. I think that my school handled it pretty well because they continued to follow up, ask us questions, ask if we're okay. They were always asking us about our mental health, making sure that we're okay, we have the resources that we need at home. And unfortunately, when I was on the call with 3 other high school students, I was hearing that they weren't getting that support from their school and they weren't being asked about their mental health and how they're dealing with everything. And so I'm just very disappointed that other schools don't have the opportunity and these students don't have the support that they need, not only for their mental health, but just for their education in general.
Right. So kids from other schools had a different experience than yours, and you heard and you felt the anxiety when you were communicating to them.
Yes.
We'll start with Dr. Jeff.
What a great question. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
How this was handled, and it's inexcusable. A total lack of leadership, and for the federal government to kick it back to states as a states issue is just it's absurd, and it's childish and it's cowardly. And I'm not saying that the federal government needed to come out with some like draconian strict set of expectations that everybody had to follow, but damn, could you have a plan? just a basic plan, okay? About like we're going for masks, social distancing, and we're going to flood resources into the communities and the small businesses and local businesses and the schools that are going to need it the most. And then the state can take that guidance and make it make sense for their respective communities, right? So what we needed in Oakland isn't going to be the same as, say, what they need in Humboldt County, which is more rural. So it doesn't make sense to have a flat plan. But the total absence of even when your leading medical official ad nauseum is giving advice, and then you're completely ignoring it. Like who? I'm sorry, but it's embarrassing and it's absurd.
I feel you.
And what I just heard, right, from the young people, is a reflection, right, of that even when schools were trying to step up, there was still so much uncertainty and this unwillingness amongst adults to just look at children and tell them the truth. Just tell them, we don't know.
And that's okay. That's okay if they say they don't know, right?
That's okay.
At least the kids will know. So Dr. Jeff, we have a few more questions. So I want to be able to get Dr. Dewan to be able to answer that question as well.
Thank you. I think that when COVID first started, there was a lot we didn't know, and we were getting a lot of mixed information from experiences across the globe. Mm-hmm. And we did try to identify like who would be the credible messengers in this work. And I think it ties back to some of the things that we were talking about earlier, is that we have to be critical in our analysis and our judgment of who is sending the message, and who can we trust to know what is the right thing to do to keep us safe. And so I think we've learned a lot in the last number of months, and in some ways it can be empowering to us as educators, and I think to children and youth, to know that there are some very simple things that we can do to stay safe and healthy with COVID-19. Wear a face covering, wash your hands a lot, social distancing, and don't take unnecessary risks just because you're around people that you know. So what we're seeing in terms of a lot of these outbreaks, it's happening because we are with our neighbor or a friend that we haven't seen in a while. It's somebody we know, so we are maybe less concerned about having our mask off, or less concerned about getting too close to that person. And so we let our guard down, and that creates opportunity for COVID-19. So I hope that we can gain some sense of control around what it is we do know, and use that in our own homes, our own neighborhoods, and our communities to try to keep each other safe.
And
thank you.
Sorry, I just really want to quickly add that, wearing a mask is definitely one of the basic ways. And, when my school was closing, I knew the day of that, okay, so like last period of the day, our assistant principal comes in and tells us, okay, like you're going to go on a 3-week vacation, you're going to come back, and COVID-19 is going to be settled. And basically, when we were asking questions, we were able to ask 5 questions. The assistant principal left, and everyone's kind of like freaking out, like what's happening, what's going on. And we were just told, okay, we're going to go home that day. We're going to be gone for 3 weeks. We're going to come back. And our teachers basically were telling us, okay, don't worry about this right now. Let's finish our lesson. Let's make the most of the time we have in the rest of our class. And we weren't allowed to process. And just after that, 1 month goes by. Okay, we're opening up May 1st. Another month goes by. Okay, we're basically just going to close up for the rest of the year. Next thing you know, the school year is starting online. And, I think it makes us as youth very worrisome, knowing that the adults also don't know. And we're looking to them, and the adults don't know, and they're looking to health professionals, and they don't know, and we're all getting mixed signals, and it's just kind of like a mess.
All right, so listen to this, and I hear what you're saying. Got to get us to transition in the next 8 minutes, and we have a boatload of questions. You guys are all superstars, and the world wants to talk to you right now. So I want to go ahead and take this question from Mark, who directs his question to Vaibhava and Victoria. What are your feelings about the decisions that are being made around online learning? Are your school administrators hearing your voice? Do they hear your voice?
I think I'm going to start, if that's okay with you,
Yeah,
for this one. I think that my school is hearing our voice. We are able to speak up. Over the summer, my school was very active with the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement, and a lot of other things. And I heard that other schools just weren't having that. And so for online learning and COVID-19, I think my school was very active in telling us what the plan was, and was always sending us emails, giving us updates so that we would always be on track with everything. But it really disappoints me to see that other people in other schools were completely confused because they weren't receiving those updates. They weren't being told what was going to happen. And so I'm very thankful to go to the school that I go to, but I just wish that I could help the surrounding schools.
Now, are these schools that are also in your county?
They are in this Bay Area.
In the Bay Area?
In the Bay Area, Silicon Valley.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And
Bye,
so,
Rebecca.
just to answer that question, so the online learning experience so far has been really good because the teachers are being more flexible and understanding of what a student has to go through daily life, you know? And I feel like in real life school, they did not have that same understanding or empathy towards students, and were kind of, you know, telling students that school was something you had to focus on and kind of ignore the rest of your life when you're at school for 6 hours. And when you come back, you continue doing whatever is told, and so on and so forth. So my school, I definitely say it's a little mixed. I definitely got a lot of announcements and information and all of that, which was great. But I think that this is definitely not, of course, subjective to my school or my district. I think this is something that all of the schools have to kind of take into consideration, is the way the curriculum is going to be handed out to students. That was something that was a little, the way it was handled wasn't the best. So we had to pick up textbooks from the school. And I was waiting, you know, for an hour and a half, I want to say, for 2 textbooks. And I thought that was kind of insane. And, you know, the social distancing while we were waiting in the line definitely wasn't marked off, 6 feet. And we weren't informed as well as I'd hope to kind of handle that situation. And some of my friends had to wait 2.5 hours just to get 1 textbook. And some of the textbooks ran out and stuff like that. So the way the curriculum was kind of handed out could have been done better.
Okay. Thank you, Viva. Now, Bettina, I know you're out there. I have not forgot about you. We are going to ask your question. But my next question is going to be from KQED Education, who is joining us here today. KQED Education, thank you for being here. And this question is directed for the students. And then after you answer, I will give Dr. Jeff and Dr. Dewan 2 minutes each to answer, because I want to direct the last question to both of you for Bettina. So this question is, do you feel that your school curriculum reflects your lived experiences in your community? If not, what do you wish the adults in your school to understand about your culture? Viva, I'm going to ask you to answer that question first.
All right. So I definitely want to say that that's a topic that is, a little bit that I can personally relate to, just community and how the curriculum is affected by, where you are geographically and what you learn about based on that. And I want to say that our curriculum is very questionable in the way that some of what is written in a textbook is not what's actually true. Now, as my experiences as an Indian American, the curriculum that was written about my culture and my ethnicity and kind of all of the information based on that, and it was incorrect. So the textbook was incorrect, and some of my community members, Indian Americans, went and contacted the California government about it, and we were able to get that fixed. However, the way it was taught was we didn't have a textbook to teach from about Indian Americans, and the amount of information that was presented was very little, and it was definitely not organized in that way. So we kind of just need to work on making sure that we have representation of each culture in every textbook and make sure that we have a better way of displaying that out.
Yeah, thank you. Let's make that an action item. Put that on the chalkboard. We're going to make that an action item. Victoria, go ahead.
I totally relate to you. As an Asian and African American, I tend to also want to hear more about my culture at my school, want the people around me to know about it, And so not being able to have that in the curriculum regularly is really difficult sometimes. And so I have to go and learn about my own culture on my own, which I really enjoy doing, but at the same time, I wish I could share that with my peers. And one thing that I've realized when I was younger, after elementary school and middle school, my dad would bring up an African American that was very strong in the community, and I wouldn't know who it was because they didn't teach it in our schools. And so I'm happy that it's starting to slowly be incorporated more as I'm in high school, but I just wish there could be more representation of it, and that's why I think ethnic studies is so important as well. And I'm hoping that not only that will be a course separately, but I hope that it can also be incorporated in regular curriculum as well, so that more people can learn about many different cultures and ethnicities.
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you.
I would just love to add a perspective that the textbook shouldn't be driving our curriculum, and that what we learn doesn't have to be limited to what's in that book.
I want to flip the question to you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, it's
please.
the same question. I'm just going to flip it a little bit, and this is for both of you too, Dr. Jeff. Do you feel that the curriculum that's within the schools that you serve reflects the lived experiences of the youth in the community? And if not, what do you wish your schools in your communities understand about the culture that they're serving?
I think historically our curriculums have been really anchored in kind of structured sets of studies around historical figures and the past, which is not reflective of our individual communities and our young persons' lived experiences. But there's been a total revitalization and energy around changing that with things like ethnic studies and civics and action, and thinking about the curriculum is much bigger than textbooks. And so I think continuing those types of efforts and expanding the resources that are available, whether that's literature, realia, field trips, conversations with historical figures and community leaders and others in our community. I think those kinds of interviews, all kinds of experiences can contribute to the curriculum and expand that in a way that allows young people to see perspective in their own lived experience.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Jeff? 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge first that the young people's responses, I mean, they were spot on. So just like ditto, cut, copy, like let's get to that. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that y'all, when you found the error, that you just didn't bury it and sit on it and eat it, that you moved on it. Y'all give me hope that we, that there's things are going to change. The answer to your question, no, absolutely not. And I guess what I would add to what Dr. Dewan just said is that I just want the broader society to be clear that curriculum is not going to save us, right? Like I don't care if we, get an ethnic studies curriculum if we're not paying attention to the pedagogy and the purpose. So it's not just about having more authors of color, right? Community stories in the curriculum. The question that I think we have to wrestle with in the field and as a nation is, for what? Why are we having these conversations? And if the intentionality is about some of the things we've been talking about here, which is critical civic engagement, right? And transformation around the radicalized inequalities that we're experiencing in the society, then sign me up. But if it's just checking off a box that, oh yeah, we have ethnic studies and, we have, a culturally diverse curriculum, I'm not interested in that, because we played that game and it hasn't transformed the experiences of the ones who most need to experience transformation in our schools.
Wow, thank you.
Could I quickly add on to that?
We got one more question.
It'll be really quick.
Go ahead.
Just to add on to that, in my AP US history class, I was the only African American student in that class, and it was very awkward at times when they would bring up things about slavery or anything pertaining to African American culture. And a lot of times I wouldn't want to fight back with them because they would continue to try to debunk my feelings or how I feel about my own culture and tell me that I'm wrong. And so I think that's where I kind of feel alone in my school, and I wish that more people could belong in their school. And that's why I asked Dr. Jeff the question earlier about how you can feel more comfortable in the place that you're put in.
Definitely
Thank you.
agree with that.
So, Dr. Jeff, you got 1 minute to answer this question. It's going to be kind of deep. Put your seatbelt on. This question is for Dr. Jeff. Okay, how do you see equity in virtual learning with your zip code being a part of your culture?
In 1 minute.
In 1 minute.
All right.
Speed round.
I told Bettina I was going to ask the question.
Yeah. Email me. It would be my response to that. Look, all of the inequities that we're experiencing and have historically experienced as a society are exacerbated right now. Right. I mean, that's what happens when you're in crisis, is that when the nation is in crisis, the people who have been in crisis are in even greater crisis. And so I think that the only way that we're going to have equity, the definition of equity that I like to use is that you get what you need when you need it. And if we're going to do that, then schools have got to center their response strategy to the most vulnerable students first. They've got to be figuring out, how are we going to support the most disconnected youth and families first? And then we can start building out from there.
Thank you very much. Ooh, you did pretty good. Thank you, Dr. Jeff. So my last question for you, Doctor. All right. And this is also from Bettina. How are we in the Santa Clara County Office of Education? That's who you represent. So how are we, or how are you serving students who do not have the same opportunity for learning in this COVID-19 time?
But there are many things that we're doing. One is to try to close that digital divide and doing exactly what Dr. Jeff said earlier about ensuring that those resources are going to our most vulnerable families first. I think additionally, finding these ways to leverage community partnerships, our work with cities and county, and not putting it all on the school to solve all those problems and challenges. And so there's so many partnerships that have been emerging and ways in which our families and communities are being served as a result of our collaboration and coordination.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Dr. Dewan, Dr. Jeff, we want to thank you for being here. The kids will have the final word. So do you want to provide us with your final thoughts, Dr. Jeff?
I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to have been, a participant in this. I'm grateful for the, community participation around the questions. And I'm especially grateful for the two sisters that are sitting on the stage right now, and just, the courage that it takes to be up there doing what you're doing, but also the ways in which you spoke some truths today that I really hope ripple, and that the adults that are listening I really hope that this sets off something where we are much more intentional about asking and listening to how it is that young people are experiencing the things that we're putting together for them in school, and that we become responsive to what it is that they say, that those comments that they made today, let them please. I hope your school leaders were listening, and that they don't let those lay dead in this space, but they actually move on the things that you shared. That would make all this worth it to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Jeff. Thank you. And Dr. Dewan, last words.
So honored to have been.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So honored to have been here with you in this space, and so proud of the young leaders on the stage who have brought us through this discussion this evening in such an eloquent and inspiring way. I'm leaving tonight very inspired and re-energized for the hard work that's ahead of us. I just want to say that, words become actions, and creating space for that dialogue, lifting up your experience into these words, I truly believe leads to action. So congratulations on a terrific event. Thanks for having me.
And so what I want the young ladies to be able to think, and thank you, Dr. Dewan, is I want you to come up with your call to action, because we're running out of time here. But I definitely need to thank the Commonwealth Club for hosting this event. And I think by allowing us to be here, that was the first call to action that we were able to see. And so we're going to need more of that. I'd like to thank Santa Clara County Office of Education for including us, the party program, and the youth that we serve throughout Santa Clara County and the Bay Area, to be engaged and to be included in these opportunities. Thank you, Dr. Jeff, for all the great work that you do. And then I'm going to shut up and then allow the young ladies to finish up.
So along with some discussions that we were able to have about the various issues that we wanted to address today, we created a list of changes that us youth hope for in schools. And so I'm going to have Vaibhava read the first two.
All right, so something that we feel is very important, especially during this time, but also when school starts in real life, is mental health awareness and support at schools that is easily accessible for students. So that means easy access to college counselors and school counselors, and that's something that people are struggling with right now in COVID-19, and we hope that that's an issue that can be fixed. The second one is educating students about the inequalities in the world, not just about the United States, but neighboring countries and countries all around the world.
Yes, and the third one that we have is teaching students more about various cultures and ethnicities. And I know that we talked a lot about that tonight, and so I find that very important. And then we have active administrators at schools addressing current issues happening inside or outside of school. And so I'm very grateful that at my school they do address these things, and so I'm hoping that other schools will follow that example and address these issues and host events, send emails so that students know that they're supported, and so that students know that the administrators at the school care. And then finally, giving students more opportunities to create change at schools and speak up about their views with the adults at the schools.
So that's awesome. We're kind of out of time. I know the kids had more on their list. So our call to action is to be able to do an event like this again, where we could include these calls of action, as well as I know there's going to be a wrap-up segment that's going to be youth-led by high school students in Santa Clara County, where they're tuning in right now, and they're going to be conducting their thoughts about what we did here today. Commonwealth Club, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
all for this opportunity to speak. We are so glad to discuss these issues with you guys and have an engaging conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope that other youth will also have this opportunity to speak up and speak about the things that they care about.
So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
We
you. It
appreciate
was
your
a
time.
pleasure.